Fat Moose Comics is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Established in 1982 and under new ownership since 2020, Moose sells a wide selection of comics from every publisher and time period, along with action figures, graphic novels, posters, statues, and more. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you're in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Acme Comics is a locally owned and operated comic book store in Greensboro, North Carolina, for people of all ages and walks of life. With more than 40 years and a new second location to its name, Acme is a multiple-time Eisner Award nominee. The shop features a significant contemporary and vintage selection, as the Acme team uses their collective knowledge and resources to connect you with the best material. Mail order subscriptions to new releases are available, and all offerings are available anywhere via mail order. Follow Acme on social media and eBay, listen to the Acme Cast on all podcast services, and visit acmecomics.com for much more. Before the rocket carrying Krypton's last hope, before the kindly couple, before the great metropolitan newspaper, there was the world that gave birth to the universe's greatest hero. Now, in Doomed Planet, we consider Krypton's history, legacy, and destruction, and the part of it that survived. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the new Krypton arc from Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, is the host of Lois and Clark, the new podcast of Superman, as well as Always Hold On to DC's Legends of Tomorrow. Welcome back, Matt Truex.
Thank you. I'm sorry that all my podcasts make you say so many words before you can get to my name, but thank you, man. It's so good to be back here.
Listen, my shows are Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey, and another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman. So
you're right. I'm in good company. I'm in very good company here.
So it's all good. Welcome back. I'm always happy to have you here to talk Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. And you're the guy, so who better to have than you?
That's an amazing thing to me that I'm the guy for that. But like, truly, I am so thankful that your podcast that dives so deep into the like the greater Superman lore has spent so much time with Lois and Clark. And like, you know, you were a fan that acknowledges and appreciates it. And that's very cool to me.
You know, I have to say, so thus far, my wife and I, we did a run of Patreon episodes where we looked at season 1 of Lois and Clark, but on the show proper, you and I did an episode on Tempest, the villain Tempest, and all of his appearances on the show. And Tyler from Krypton Report, he came on and we did an episode all about the frog-eating clone arc from season 3.
Which is an excellent episode, by the way.
Thank you. It was interesting to revisit. And of course, now we're here to talk about this new Krypton arc. But I got to say, when I first started with this podcast, I didn't know how much of a presence Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman would have. It's something that I watched as a kid. I've talked about this before. I was 6 to 10 when it originally aired, and I have vague memories of watching it, but not unlike yourself, it was really when it was airing in syndication on TNT. That's more, I think, the viewing that cemented itself more in my head. And I always had affection and nostalgia for it, but I probably, in the years since, kind of fell into that camp of, listen, it was limited in terms of what it could bring forth on screen and a little dated, a little campy and all of that. And I was probably, dismissive is maybe too strong of a word, but generally speaking, that probably characterized the way I looked at the show. Sure. Foolishly, because now that I've gone back to it over the past few years of doing this podcast, I come away with such a newfound respect and appreciation for this show in so many ways. So I'm always happy now to take the opportunity to talk about it. And it just celebrated its 30th anniversary.
Yes. Yeah. Just a couple months ago. No, I totally get that. It's funny. I was listening. There's a reason. But I was listening to an episode from season 2 of my podcast the other day. And I'm like, oh, I'm not super in love with it here. And I've always loved the show, but I'm like, I'm still like kind of, and my co-host at the time is part of that energy, but I'm still kind of like making fun of it and apologizing for it. Whereas like truly as it went on, as I did like the podcast, I just like all of my kind of cynicism for it really just rubbed off. And I was like, nope, just shut up. You like it. There are some weird things here. There's some stuff I absolutely detest. But at the heart of it, it is like my comfort food show, you know?
No, listen, I totally hear you. And I was really thinking about this in advance of our recording. And I think there are two things that have made me fall in love with the show in a way that I hadn't before. Number one is that, look, as an adult who's married, right, I can appreciate all of the relationship drama in a way that I didn't and just couldn't as a little kid watching this. I enjoyed it, right? And some of it resonated, but it wasn't
They should be together and kiss, but that was about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I watch all of this now with new eyes and a completely different perspective. And the other thing, and this is what really kind of clicked a lot into place for me, is over these past few years of doing the podcast, I have been immersed in all of these Superman stories across time and media. And I think the beauty of that is I don't need any one thing that I'm consuming to be everything for me. So I think if you look at Lois and Clark in an absolute vacuum, yeah, you might come away saying, oh, I want more comic book elements. I want more action. I want more special effects, whatever the case may be. I don't need that. I get that elsewhere. So I can look at this and be like, no, I really just want to see the relationship stuff. Mm-hmm. And the show has it in spades. And so it really scratches that itch and it fills that role beautifully.
And it's funny that we're talking about like all this right now, where it's like we're about to cover it's the show's best attempt at like giving you a blockbuster, you know?
Yes. So let me lay it out here for our audience. So this is the New Krypton arc. So the last 2 episodes of season 3, Through a Glass Darkly and Big Girls Don't Fly from May 1996. And then the first 2 episodes of season 4, Lord of the Flies and Battleground Earth from September 1996. So this 4-episode New Krypton arc where Clark discovers that there's this lost colony of Kryptonians out there. And he has been not just promised to marry, but actually already wed to Lady Zara. And he's being summoned to New Krypton to fulfill this role in Kryptonian society and stave off this civil war that's being instigated by the nefarious Lord Nor.
Lord Nor.
This was a big arc, man.
It is. It's. I'm so curious to see your take on it as you've been living through Kryptonian, versions the past couple weeks. To me, it is so like its own thing, but I like it's but it's still it's very much like big space opera through this show's filter, which is frankly to make it a little more medieval and make it a little more about weddings and noble houses and relationships and like that's the drama here. It's interesting.
It is. It really is. And I'll say this. So we're in the middle of this doomed planet event here. We looked at the entire Krypton TV series. We looked at a selection of pre-crisis Kandor comic book stories. And after this episode, we are going to look at the New Krypton saga from the comics from the late aughts, right? And I'll be honest, when I was first mapping out this event, I didn't initially have a spot for Lois and Clark. And as I was seeing how it was taking shape, I was like, no, I think this is an important kind of bridge because when we get to that New Krypton arc, it's all about Kandor being restored to full size and Clark being torn between these two worlds. But before we got that, we had this arc on the show. Plus, I just wanted another opportunity to sit down and chat with you. And I was like, this'll do.
And not have to jump through time on the Wave Rider to do it. I totally understand.
But I want to, before we'll unpack everything as we always do, but I want to ask you, because you've covered all of these episodes individually on your podcast, and you did an Arc Talk episode with Krypton Site's Craig Byrne, which we were talking about off mic, where you did what we're about to do here, where you look at these 4 episodes as a whole. So you've spent a lot of time with this arc over the years. And I guess I'm just curious, with this viewing of it, what, if anything, changed for you? Was there anything where your opinion improved or soured? Did you pick up on something you didn't previously? What, if anything, was different this time around?
So I watched them all more or less in one sitting this time, which I've never done before. And kind of the arc and I've been watching a lot of Lois and Clark right now anyway, because this is what I do in September, October, November. Like this is the mood that I get in and I jump into that. But watching all 4 of them just as one big thing, it struck me like how much they are trying. They are trying to wow you with big special effects and big emotions and big moves here. And the episodes that don't have the big special effect thing will have the big emotional turn, and vice versa. So I'd like, honestly, I guess it's kind of like, if you want to talk about it like this, it's kind of two movies. It's like Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, essentially. But in that way, like, that was the first time that I've kind of been struck by that, of just like how well it all kind of sings together and feels oddly of a piece for the show that didn't specialize in serial storytelling or continuity from time to time, you know?
Yeah, I have to say, and I wish I had. It's weird. I wish I had more of a memory of watching this when it originally aired.
Mm.
I remember it, I guess, just more in broad strokes. I definitely, if nothing else, I do remember feeling like, wow, that was epic, right? And I, even watching it now, I still have that sense, but especially as a kid and without everything else that we've had to watch since then, you know, really just looking at it through young eyes at that time, I think they really achieved a lot. So I think my main memories were just, wow, that was cool. The black suit, which again, I still have the same reaction to, and the alien assassin Tez as a kid creeped me the hell out. Now, not so much, but as a kid, and there's that scene in the second episode in the arc when he sneaks up on Lois in that like back area
of the Daily Planet.
Yeah.
That we've never really seen before, yes.
And I remember as a kid, like, it really did freak me out a little bit. So those were, I think, the main things that, you know, that I kind of remembered of it. But watching it now, and I messaged you about this, I was just so impressed. I feel like they were firing on all cylinders. Yep. I agree. I mean, there was an ambition and a scope to this. The stakes were so high plot-wise, but in terms of the emotion as well. And I just kind of feel like this kind of brought together a lot of the different forces and components of the show, because you have these two star-crossed lovers literally here, right? Who are being kept apart, hot on the heels of the frog-eating clone arc where they were kept apart.
Yes.
Touch on that.
Let's talk about that in context of the show. Yes. But yeah, continue.
You know, but so you have that, you have the Smallville piece, the Metropolis piece, the Krypton piece. And I think that's particularly fascinating here, because this was a show really focused on Clark. Clark is who he is, focusing on the human side, very much in keeping with the John Byrne reboot and the Triangle era of the comics that I grew up with. So I always felt right at home watching Lois and Clark. But so to now, not introduce, because we had dealt with some Kryptonian business before, but not a lot. So it's like now to really kind of bring that back and have him be torn between these two worlds. I just thought it was fascinating. I feel like it was just so many different aspects of the show coming together with a scale and stakes you really haven't seen otherwise in the show. And I was so impressed. Like, I so enjoyed watching these. I watched them over 2 nights and I just had the best time.
I love this conversation. So this is going very well. Let's put that in context then for a little bit too. You mentioned the frog eating clone arc, which obviously you've done an episode on. But basically, they had a wedding that didn't happen. And then they extended that arc by giving her amnesia for 2 episodes. 2 episodes that are 2 of the most hated and derided episodes of this entire show. It was a complete misfire. If you look at the ratings at that time, it is like a steep decline where people are just like, what the hell with this at this point? So, and like, who knows when they're actually planning, you know, the early days of what the first 2 episodes, you know, the end of season 3 became. But for me, it very much feels like look, we did our big wedding stunt. We then pissed off the fans. We have to win them back. So, you know, end of season 3 is table setting, and they knew that they'd have to deliver something really big for the start of season 4, which is why you're saying, like, kind of everyone stepping their game up. At the start of season 4, this is a show that shot almost exclusively on the Warner Brothers lot. Like, they never went on location, and still it feels pretty grand. You've got their big Krypton sets. You've got a live orchestra for the music for the first time since the pilot. Like, they're really pushing and going for it in order to kind of win the fans back. And it works for a second, and then season 4, you know, goes off. But as far as like what I think they wanted to accomplish with these episodes, I think they kind of knock it out of the park. And we're talking about it like it is Empire Strikes Back. It's not. It's still Lois and Clark, but it's Lois and Clark operating and working at like its fullest potential.
Yes, I think that that's fair. So for anyone listening to this, it's like, yeah, I do think, well, and I think this is a little bit debatable too, because whether or not, well, let me just ask you, do you feel like this represents the pinnacle of the show?
Pinnacle or typical? Like pinnacle, maybe just because it is like everyone is truly trying their hearts out. Here the only thing that's not working up to its full potential is Terry Hatcher's wig. But the rest of everybody is doing well. It's not a typical episode of Lois and Clark in any way whatsoever. I think you'd have to look at some of the standalone stuff to kind of show like what the show could do at its best, average day. But this is with a little more time, a little more money, a little more patience. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but like I think it's almost a different. You have to grade on a different curve for these.
That's fair. And our mutual friend Rob O'Connor, who I know is a fellow folk, he made a similar point on social media where kind of exactly to what you were saying, where no, this is not typical. It's not representative of the average Lois and Clark.
If this was
episode.
your first episode of Lois and Clark, you're going to be disappointed with a lot of other Lois and Clark,
But what I would, for me, I think what was representative were the themes and the relationship between the two of them, the love that they have, the devotion, the lengths that they would go to for each other, the influence of Jonathan and Martha, what they've done for him, what they mean for him, what he means to the world. Like there's so much thematically. And I guess that's when I say the pinnacle of the show. Yeah. I mean, I what would I really consider the best of Lois and Clark? I probably would gravitate towards maybe some of my favorite season 1 episodes, and then probably that mid to end of season 2 and very beginning of season 3. Like that's probably in my heart. Yeah. I mean, that's probably the sweet spot for me. But again, here I feel like, yeah, you have the scale and the stakes and the ambition coupled with the thematics that I really do feel are representative of the rest of it. So for me, I do kind of look at this as like, I don't know. I feel like if someone hadn't watched Lois and Clark or hadn't watched it in a while, I agree. If you were looking to show them something that would give them a feel of the entire series, maybe not. Right. But at the same time, if they were like, listen, I'm only going to watch a few episodes, I might show them these.
Yeah. Here's the pilot. And then here's these 2 other movies that they did at some point in here. Yeah, no, I get what you mean with that. And there is like, it is unabashedly Lois and Clark in the themes of this. And that's why I kind of talked to like, I'd love to get your take on like, what is your favorite Krypton? But like, Lois and Clark is my favorite Superman. I don't think this is my favorite Krypton. This whole like House of Nobles and blah, blah, blah. And we must be wed as children in order to stave off the Civil Wars or whatever. But does it work for the Lois or the Superman story that is at its core a rom-com or a soap opera, depending on the day? Absolutely. And do all of these characters feel on model and nobody's like, feels like they're being stretched? Absolutely. In the best way.
And, when you say rom-com, I was thinking about this too. And I know that, you've talked about this a lot, who the intended audience was for this. And I think about my mom. Like my mom watched Lois and Clark pretty much all the way through. She has been watching Superman and Lois. So there are other examples, but until very recently, right? Lois and Clark, like she watched a little bit of the George Reeves show when she was a kid, and she saw Superman the movie, as everyone did when it came out at the time. And she did like a little Smallville when I was watching it originally. But Lois and Clark, that was the show she watched. And I feel like this arc in particular, I feel like they walked a fine line because there's enough. Again, you get the black suit and you get their take on a Zod-esque character in the form.
We'll get to that, yeah.
And we have our space station, and there's all of those bigger set pieces and concepts and all that.
Whatever.
Exactly. But you still have that the sweeping romance between the two of them, between Lois and Clark, especially when they're separated. And I agree. I feel like the last 2 of season 3 and the first 2 of season 4, they do feel like a 2-part movie, right? Where you have the first part, really, I feel more of the emotion, right? As Clark is weighing whether or not to leave Earth, and of course, ultimately decides to, and it's a heartbreaking farewell. And then you get into all of this business where he has to come back and he's got to fight Lord Nor's taking over Smallville, and so
it rocks so hard, yeah.
It really does, man. At the same time, I'm like, I don't want to oversell this too much.
I know we've caveated. I think we can be, yeah. But
Yeah.
yes, I totally feel that kind of push and pull of like it's still Lois Clark. Um, but yeah, I love how it escalates here, and you're talking about like the emotions and stuff, like the way that they do not ignore anyone's feelings here, and they don't make it would be so easy to make Lois the bitch here, to make Lois the one that like does not want this to happen. And of course, at first they do, because Terry Hatcher is a gifted comedian, and they can play off those like, well, oh, you're married on Krypton. We're not on Krypton though, are we? You know, us wacky Earth women and that type of thing. And it's really fun. And then once the seriousness of it hits in, it is lovely, and the two of them are heartbroken, and they're making the sacrifice, and the Kents have this beautiful speech about marching for civil rights and it being their fight. Is this your fight, son? It just like it feels so real and emotionally, you know, it's all wacky and stupid, but we're talking about Superman, it's always going to be wacky and stupid. But like, if you can make something like that feel emotional, then you're doing your job right, and that's what this show does on its best days.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm going to sound like a weepy mess to the audience because this is now the third time within this 6-part event that I said this. I teared up. I teared up when he's saying goodbye to Jonathan and Martha and Lois, but especially the scene, the moment with Jonathan and Martha in the Daily Planet in the office, when he says, "You're the only parents I've ever known, the only parents I've ever wanted, and any good that I can bring to New Krypton is because of you." Oh,
come on. And even even just the quiet moments where they've kind of had that talk I was just talking about with the civil rights. Is this your fight with the Kents? And that's really the kind of come to Jesus moment for the two of them. And there's no dialogue in the next shot, but she's out on his balcony and she's looking in at him sitting alone in his kitchen, and they both just lock eyes. And it's just that moment of like, oh fuck, they both know that this has to happen. Like they both just decided silently. And that's what it's going to be. And then they go to the new Kryptonians and are just basically like, we decided that he's going to go. Like, we stand together in this decision. It's awesome, man.
It really is. So maybe let's circle back.
We got right into this. I'm open, Clemson. Yeah, okay.
Well, look, the personal, the emotional, that's always, I think, what's most important at the end of the day. But let's jump back to the beginning of this arc here, because we have this initial setup episode.
Yeah, because it starts awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, where we have the characters we will come to know as Lady Zara and Lieutenant Ching.
Mm-hmm.
But we initially meet them as Sarah, the new researcher at the Daily Planet, and Dave Miller, real estate agent.
Dave Miller, thank you. Oh my God. Nicely done.
Which also I have to say, because again, I listened to the episode that you did. I watched these.
What did I say?
No. I watched these just a night apart, and I did not realize until probably the 4th episode that they had swapped out actors playing Lieutenant Ching, because I knew the business about. So the first actor who played him at the end of season 3 was John Tenney, and was married to Terry Hatcher at the time.
Husband of Terry Hatcher. Yes.
Then husband. And maybe I had that swirling in my head, and it sent me to IMDb to double check, and I'm not seeing him there. I was like, and then I went back to the credits for season 3, and he's listed in that first episode just as Dave Miller. And then I'm getting so confused. I'm like, wait a minute, did we meet the real Dave Miller? I was so confused, and then I realized. So great job. I have to say, the recasting was great. Cause
look, they've done it twice on this show, in very high profile ways. It's funny because truly in the season 4 episodes, when they've recast him, his character takes a back seat and takes the back of frame. And it's just like, as little as we can focus on this man's face, the poor actor, the better.
I know it's true. But in any event, so we meet these two mystery characters, and over the course of part 1 of this 4-part arc, they are putting Superman through various tests. They sabotage a space station. They plant a bomb.
Amazing.
They put Jimmy and Perry and the city in danger, and Clark has to choose who he's going to save. Yeah. And of course, the answer is, as it always is, save everybody. Because of course.
But it's cool. Like I like just the thematic, or I guess story wise, how they kind of break up. Because like Ching is a bastard in this first episode. He is the villain of the story until at the end you realize, oh, they're Kryptonian, and that kind of changes things. But the first one is just about might, right? Like, can this guy actually stop a space giant ass, very cool model of a space station from crashing into Earth? And he does it. The second one is about he becomes the Riddler suddenly, and it's like, oh well, if you go north on the, I forget exactly what it is, but it's all about like movies and symphonies and stuff, and he saves the day again. And then the second one is like, all right, where's your heart lie? Can you will you save your friends? Will you save the city? Of course, it's both. And then the third one or the fourth one is, how good a person are you? If I, the asshole that's been messing with you, am going to kill myself and you have to jump through kryptonite to do it, to stop me, will you try to stop me? And of course he does. So it's just like, and that is the moment where like Ching melts and is like, oh, you're a better person than I thought. Okay, you're right. You're good. And then they fly off. It's awesome.
I agree, man. I love how they challenged him in those different ways. And
it gets to the core of the character too.
And I really appreciated when Clark was saving the space station that he was struggling, right? And even when he comes back to the planet later, he's rubbing his shoulder.
It's a little like, ow, yeah.
Yeah, because this is not the omnipotent Superman that maybe we've seen in prior incarnations, right? Again, this era very much scale down the powers a bit, make him sweat a little bit more, not unlike what we would see in Superman the Animated Series and elsewhere. And
I was going to say, he's less nerfed than he is in that, but he's still like, he's not lassoing a sun.
Yeah, so I really thought that was cool. The bit where he has to choose between saving Jimmy and Perry, who are off on their fishing trip, which I know you made a joke about that when in your episode, but that's like right out of, I mean, I'm sure there have been other instances, but the George Reeves Adventures of Superman. There's at least one episode in the first season where they're just off on a fishing trip. But at least I have to say, in the Adventures of Superman show, that Perry was a real hard ass and was really, he had some moments where you saw a little bit of a softer side come through, but he was nowhere near the father figure that Lane Smith's Perry is. And so this fishing trip made a lot more sense. It's like, yeah, of course I could buy that these guys would be off having this trip. I will say though, Lois gives him the idea. She's like, he can't split himself into two, right? So of course that gives him the idea.
Wait a minute, somebody had a split in two device earlier this episode. Let me go grab that. Yeah.
And I'm being facetious and nitpicky here, but it's like the way he flies up into the sky, and it's like he's like just eyeballing this.
Yeah, I know.
And he's able to split his heat vision into and to take care of the bomb where Perry and Jimmy are, and in the city. And it's just like, all right, I'll go with it.
He does an even more asinine one in like mid season 4, where he throws a shard of mirror up into space, lasers the mirror, and the mirror, like, it reflects his laser and blows up the bomb or whatever, wherever it has to. But it's like, oh, this guy, his mental math is incredible.
So I know I'm jumping ahead a bit, but I agree with you in that instance. But I feel like in numerous other scenes, especially as we get into season 4, when he's trying to learn the Kryptonian customs, boy, does he really seem to struggle. I know I'm skipping ahead a bit, but they're explaining like, okay, Zara's got to walk a few paces behind you, and you have to walk with your palms facing up and say, "Brother, I greet you thrice." And he's like, he can't. He's like really struggling to keep up with this, and it's like, come on, man, you're Superman, and not only are you Superman, you're a Clark Kent who's traveled the world. You have met all of these cultures. I'm sure you've encountered customs along these lines before. It's like, you gotta get with it a little bit.
All the other different languages and stuff. I'm honestly, I hear what you're saying. I'm gonna put that on Zara and Ching. It is like, as shit's happening, they're like feeding him lines and telling him what's gonna happen, and it's like, what the hell? Like, as they're walking down the aisle, she's like, oh, by the way, there's gonna be a wedding. It's like, what why yeah, okay, what do I do?
Fair enough. No, that's
fair. On them. They had a whole little weird Orby ship flight where they could have been laying this stuff out for him.
Indeed. I will also say that, and again, in this first episode, so we still don't know they're Kryptonians, and to the show's credit, I guess this cuts both ways, and I'm a little bit mixed on this, but they communicate, Chang and Zara, via telepathy, right? And
this is the biggie, okay.
And we'll learn right in the next episode when they communicate where they communicate with Clark through this means, and they're like, this is how the Kryptonian people communicate with each other. And the chairs and the orb are materializing. Like there are things. It really isn't until we get to the end of that first episode and they fly off, and you're like, oh
hell,
okay. So I don't know. So I guess I kind of the other powers and things like that, it's like it does keep you guessing. But then when you know they're Kryptonian, it's like, oh, okay, so we're introducing this. I remain a bit mixed on that side of it.
I do too. Like I don't have a strong opinion on the mental telepathy thing, though I do like the gimmick of like, you've never known about this power because there's never been anyone on the other line, you know? I think that makes sense. Whereas, I don't know. It also feels just a little bit story-wise easy for them. Like it's a cool alien thing, you know, theoretically, and we don't have to explain why we're getting to him or whatnot. It does make me think like, well, you could have done like the Superman, we're coming to you on this frequency that only you and the neighborhood dogs can hear, and like that type of thing. I don't know. It's much cleaner in the later episodes when we've got a bunch of Kryptonians and lower the force field, or of course, ladies are well, then you know, like that type of thing. When Lord Nor is present, it gets a little bit easier to swallow because it's like, all right, this is just a shortcut to them getting on a conference call, basically.
It is, and look, as much as I have kind of a certain power set cemented in my brain, there have been other powers over the years. And look, on my beloved Smallville, right, in season 9, when Clark's undergoing his training and Jor-El gives him the ability to read minds. Like, where the hell is this coming from?
I forgot about that. That, or like, I mean, let's be real. The forget-me-not kiss, the throwing a cellophane S. Like, Kryptonians have pulled a lot of crap like this in the past, so it is just what it is. Maybe this is no, sorry, I'll save it.
No, it's okay. You go for it.
I'm sorry, we're jumping all over
It's
the place,
fine.
but like as you're going through this current the Doomed Planet series that you're on, even before this, do you have like a headcanon favorite version of Krypton, or is it kind of a mix where you like bits from each one?
The Richard Donner vision is so iconic, and the whole crystal motif, right? We've seen that in so many places, so it's easy. I think if you say Krypton, that's probably what is going to pop into my head first. But if I really think about it, the opening of Man of Steel, which then
really,
which then of course, you know, we just talked about how Krypton was originally meant to be a prequel to that, and then they pivoted, and so it doesn't line up, but it still at least takes some cues from that. So I think
a little bit, yeah.
So I think like kind of that Man of Steel, and then I mean, again, I only just watched Krypton, so it's still very fresh, but I think that's kind of what I gravitate towards. Are you going towards the whole royal aspect? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I was kind of just going to ask you if you see that kind of royal aspect of things, the more, again, Renaissance fair version of Krypton that we have here at Lois and Clark. Do you see elements of that in other places? Because like really my only other exposure to Krypton before this show, or like, you know, at the same time of this show, was the movie, but the animated series and the first couple, you know, the bit that John Byrne deals with it in Man of Steel.
Yeah, I have to say that, and look, my pre-crisis comics knowledge of Krypton is still relatively limited, so maybe there's something there that would speak to it. But
totally, yeah.
But as far as what we've seen in the modern era, and especially in other media, no, it's always been this, again, more scientific-minded society. Right. Now, again, watching the Krypton show, you see the sharp social division and all this business about the gilded and the rankless. Yeah. So this notion of
theocracy and whatever.
Yeah, that's the thing. They start off as this theocracy, then they become this militaristic society.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you have, at least at the outset, this ruling class and this sharp division. So this whole idea of nobility and the families marrying to keep the peace, again, it doesn't really line up with kind of what I have in my head as Krypton.
Same.
But what I will say, this whole idea of your life, and this come in different forms, but being predetermined, that I feel does track, right? So this whole idea that these children, they even refer to Zara as birth wife, right? This idea,
not a sentence I'm comfortable with. Yes.
Like they're born into these marriages. And so, I mean, even beyond an arranged marriage, it's like they're married, right? Because that's the whole business, whereas like Lois, oh, you have to marry her. It's like, well, technically we're already married.
Right. He just popped out of the Nexus pod or whatever. So let's dry him off and get him over here and tie his hand to this other infant and the other married.
So I guess
God forbid he's gay.
Well, I don't know that version.
How advanced is that? Technology on Krypton.
But I think that's what I kept going back to. So like this idea that the L's are this noble family and they're part of this ruling class and their marriage is going to preserve peace, and that Clark has been wed to this Lady Zara from the moment of his birth.
House of Ra.
That piece of it, does that totally track or line up for me? Is it what I gravitate towards? No, not necessarily. But again, this idea that there is this fundamental choice that has been taken away from him, that does line up. And that goes back to like the version of Krypton that I grew up with from the John Byrne, which is really not my favorite version, but this idea that they're this cold, sterile place, that children are not even conceived naturally. It's all through this artificial genesis chamber. And then again, moving forward to the Snyder Man of Steel version and Jor-El's whole speech about how everyone's role in society is predetermined, and Kal-El was the first natural birth in generations, and what happens if a child dares to be something different than what society intended for him or her, right? That whole business, that tracked. So again, thematically, it felt in keeping with what I kind of have in my head. Mm-hmm. How about you?
No, that's a good point. I'd never thought of it thematically. I've always honestly tripped up on the on the table setting of it all, on the set dressing, really, the noble houses, the just how high fantasy it all feels, and how strange it is to me that that's where they took it. And it honestly, it's such a left. Sorry, hit the mic. Honestly, it's such a left turn from where the comics or anything else that we've seen before is, that it almost feels like a middle finger to DC Comics sometimes during this, where it's just like, all right, you don't want us to do it? Well, we're going to go a completely different version and do our own damn thing and use our own silly names. And it's not going to be anything like what you've done before,
Well, that's actually an interesting point, because in that John Byrne version, where it was this very cold, sterile world, there's no physical contact between people, right? It's a big deal at the end of the first issue or middle of the first issue of Man of Steel, where Jor-El and Lara touch hands.
Laura gets there. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So this idea that here they're gonna have their moment to consummate their marriage, right? That's a departure, right, from what was going on in the comics at the time. So yeah, it's interesting that you say that. We reference the television series Smallville a lot around here, and there's one Smallville rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor as they discuss each and every episode of the series that ushered in the renaissance of superhero TV. Listen to Always Hold On to Smallville wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On to banner, including Arrow, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, Superman and Lois, and Star Wars. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates and promotes everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations: Harrison, New York, aka my local comic shop, Skokie, Illinois, or Muncie, Indiana. If you have kids and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow Aw Yeah on social media for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. I'm a proud backer of the Paragons of Earth crowdfunder. The creative team of Percival Constantine, Thomas DJ, and Eric Johns have plucked forgotten Golden Age superheroes from the public domain, reinvented them as their own sort of Justice League, and put them up against a Lovecraftian apocalypse. Support this project by going to crowdfunder.com, that's crowdfunder without an E, /Paragonscomic, and read a free sample. Also, Perry, who's been a guest on the show, hosts the Superhero Cinephiles podcast about superheroes in media. Be sure to listen wherever you get podcasts.
Yeah, that is what's always struck me. But you're absolutely right, and I love the point that you made about just like it's in one way or another the resurgence of Krypton in his life is somehow repressing the life that he wants, or like the choices that he wants to make.
Yeah. So I think it tracks. Also, it's funny, going back to Man of Steel, Jor-El's flying around on that winged, they're flying around on winged creatures.
Big dragon thing, yeah.
And we just in the last episode, when we looked at those pre-crisis comic stories, there were these white winged creatures as well. And we talked about how that verged on the fantasy realm. So there is, I agree. I mean, I think when we think Krypton, we really do think sci-fi and justifiably so based on what we've seen. But there are these moments where we do see like fantasy elements kind of blending in a bit. So I don't know that it's as out of left field as probably I felt at the time when I was when I was first watching this. What I will say, and this maybe is kind of nitpicky, I don't like that Lady Zara made it onto the rocket ship. Right?
Me neither.
Too much. Don't like that.
I don't like that rocket ship either. Again, this isn't my podcast. I am very obsessed with the first version of that prop of the ship that takes into Earth that we see in that show. It was then stolen off the set, and they made a quick and dirty version of it for the end of season 3 for the second episode we're talking about here. And supposedly on the inscription, which are just, by the way, Celtic runes. Like all of a sudden, all this alien stuff got a lot more simple. But again, it, like you're saying, it's literally stating like, this is Kal-El of the House of El or whatever. He's married to this other infant. They're going to be great together. And then they put their hands on it, and Jor-El's like, yup, it's true. Stay with Zara. I'm so glad you guys found each other. Cool. Good luck. Very stupid to me.
Yeah, that was the bridge to out of all of the things. That was the part where I'm like, no. It just, you know what it is though. I think there's something sacred about that. It's so, that ship is so iconic, and this idea
in every version, it is always important. Yes, that
rocket. When you open up All-Star Superman and you have that beautiful distillation of the origin onto just those few panels, and it's the rocket.
God, it's beautiful.
It's just it's iconic, and so to sort of muddy it up with all of this business about the arranged marriage, I didn't love that. What I wanted to say, I guess the last big thing about just that first episode, and we've already hit on a lot of things from the other episodes, but that first episode, the final test where Chang has surrounded himself with this kryptonite force field, right?
Kryptonite laser force field thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And this test about whether or not, Clark will sacrifice himself, will, penetrate the force field in order to save Chang, who's going to shoot himself, right? Is that the setup?
Yeah, a little gun materializes in his head, and he puts it in his hand, and he puts it to his head.
It was just interesting to me because I feel like, I'm not saying I'm like Superman, but I like to think that in a lot of ways, I try to emulate the morals and the values that.
As we both sit here with an S on our chests.
Exactly,
yes,
it means something, right? It's not, the lessons I like to think have resonated over the years. At the same time, as I'm watching this, I say to myself, well, there is a line that I can draw here, because if that were me and someone who had put all of these people in jeopardy, although, right, we find out, at least in some of the instances, like with the space station, it would have saved itself had Clark not intervened. Although I don't think there were similar fail safes with the other, with the bombs.
This was not good. Yeah. Perry and all of Metropolis were gonna die. Yeah.
So this is someone who has put Clark through these tests and has put people in jeopardy. And now the only one who's in jeopardy is this guy himself. And the only way, it seems, to save him is for Superman to sacrifice himself. That's the point where I would have been like, all right, buddy, suit yourself.
Dude, same. That is the part where I'm like, oh, I'm not Superman. Like and it's also the part where it's like, obviously there are different versions of the character out there. Some that would be happy to snap his neck with their own two hands in that scene. For me, that is the show doubling down on like, this is the nicest man that has ever lived. Like, he truly, it's almost the Superman, the humanist thing, where like the most precious thing to him is a life, which I'm not, sounds like I'm complaining or being judgy of, I think is lovely. But I am kind of the same way here, where it's like, I almost want Lois to be like, I mean, if he dies, he dies. He's pulling the trigger, Clark. You don't hurt yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I also liked, and clearly, look, they were setting up the conflict to come, but I did like earlier in that first episode where Lois and Clark are talking about getting married, and of course how it's been delayed, and she just wants to elope and just do it with a few friends, and she'll get her wish in a few episodes.
Well,
Guardian Angel
God.
Mike.
Oh God, continue. Yeah.
But she, they talk about what if she says like, oh, imagine if you've never left Smallville. And he's like, Smallville, imagine if I never left Krypton. And then she asks, like, do you ever think about your parents? And he's like, sometimes, but that's in my past. And again, clear setup for what's to come. But I like that there was that little beat between the two of them.
Totally. And I feel like it's very true to the experience of an adopted child, where it's like that no matter how much you love your Kents who found you in a field, there is always going to be that question of like what happened before. And that seems very honest to me. I don't like, forgive me if we've talked about this in the past, but like I hate in current versions when like people will call him, even like other heroes or whatever, will call him Cal. I'm like, he does not identify with that in my mind. Like he knows that that's where he came from, but like he is Clark, he is Superman. So like that kind of speaks to that for me, where it's like in this episode he says it as much, like the more I try to be in these episodes, like the more I try to be Kryptonian, the more I try to be Kal-El, the more I realize I'm Clark. But it should always be there. It should always be kind of that back of his mind thing.
I hear you. I know. I feel like when it's someone like Wonder Woman or Martian Manhunter, Martian Manhunter in particular, where he is from another planet, and
that I get,
and even Diana from Themyscira from another world. It's like I guess I get why they would kind of call him that, but yeah, I know.
I don't get it with Diana. I totally get it with Manhunter, especially if it's a version of Manhunter that has been to Krypton or new Kryptonians.
Yes. No, I know that's very true. But I like that scene between them. And then again, going back to where we started in terms of where this arc falls. Yeah, we had the whole frog eating clone business and the wedding that wasn't. And, we did our whole episode talking about that. There was also, I actually did watch this just to sort of get myself back in the Lois and Clark mindset. I did watch that one episode in between the frog eating clone amnesia business and this.
It's a small world.
Yeah. Yeah. Co-written by Terry Hatcher, where they go to her high school reunion. And her classmates shrinking people, and Superman gets shrunk down. It was, I hadn't watched it in years, so
she is a talented actress. That's what it will say.
Yeah. But I guess as far as means to delay the wedding and keep them apart. Well, I guess let me ask you this: because I know we enjoy this arc. There's so much that we love about it. But in terms of its timing, it is right on the heels of another arc, another multi-episode arc that delayed the wedding and kept them apart. And so now we have it. So even putting aside the fact that we like this, we think this is effective, how do you feel about the timing of it? That it's yet another impediment to them actually getting married?
I think it is. I think it's well timed, and it's so hard to think of it for me without thinking of how much they screwed the pooch with the amnesia stuff, especially right after the wedding. I think it makes all the sense in the world to not get them married in the season finale here, just given the landscape of network television at the time, where like that type of thing was looked on as a death knell. It's like, well, now all your chemistry is gone or whatever, Yeah, I've got no problem with it in that way. And I think truly at that point, it takes them being worlds apart to stop them from getting married. And I like, just like as a log line, I love that aspect of it as well.
No, I hear you. I agree. It's again, it was interesting, not to rehash because we did the whole episode, but it was interesting going back and watching the clone arc. The Lois and Clark seemingly get married. It turns out Lex has replaced her with a clone, and then it just continues because she loses her memory.
It just keeps happening at us, yeah.
And she adopts this other persona from a novel she had written, and then she loses her memory entirely. And it's those last episode or so where she's fully has amnesia, and she's in the that rehab center.
You say her name. Her name is Wanda Detroit. Yeah. Remember it.
But they had various outs throughout that arc that they just didn't take, and it was just it just kept going. But those were artificial forces keeping them apart, and some work better than others. I really love the Lex of it all in that, and when he finds out Clark's secret, like there's some there's great stuff.
Incredible John Shea Lex Luthor stuff there, yeah,
for sure. But like here, what I appreciated about this is that yes, you do have this external force in the form of New Krypton, but it's not that New Krypton comes and like abduct Clark, right? It's that he does have a choice, right? Mm-hmm. He's Superman, so of course we know what the choice was, but he does have a choice. And so that tension, that keeping them apart, it to me is far more palatable and tracks and is a much richer drama.
Another great point of it. Again, it is their decision. She is not fighting this. Ultimately, they both get to the same place, and even his parents are on board with why this has to happen. Like that's what buys it for me, you know?
Yeah. So when we get to that second episode, that's where, again, Chang and Lady Zara reveal themselves as members of New Krypton, that there were about 1,000 or so of them who had left Krypton before it was destroyed to find a new home, and all they found was this barren rock that they settled on and called a New Krypton. And I liked some of the barbs from Chang, where it's like, you know, we didn't have takeout and sitcoms here.
Basic cable or whatever. Oh, that was it. Yeah, situation comedies.
Yeah, the resentment that Clark has grown up with powers and with all of these comforts that they haven't had on New Krypton. And so again, there's a lot that's sort of downloaded to Clark and the audience in that second episode about who they are, why they're here. Much of what we've touched on already, that Clark is part of this noble family, and he's meant to return to New Krypton and rule with Lady Zara in order to prevent a civil war, again, being instigated by this Lord Nor character.
Lord Nor, who we will get to. Yeah.
Oh, we'll get to him for sure. So I guess one of the main reasons why, the main reason why this episode is part of this arc, right, is we deal with this lost piece of Krypton. It's not Kandor, right? It's not the bottle city of Kandor, but it's
not Argo or whatever.
Yeah, but it's kind of in that vein, right? There's this piece of Krypton. Although unlike Kandor, where it's been bottled and there's this removal there's this barrier, right? Clark can shrink down and enter and this and that. And we talked about those pre-crisis stories where at a certain point, it's like, all right, it's like too much access to millions of Kryptonians. But that being said, even within that, it's like there is this inherent tragedy to it. And he it is this ongoing quest to try to restore them to normal size and all of that. Whereas here, it's just this planet of Kryptonians out there.
Right.
This is another aspect that I remain mixed on is having this whole outpost of Kryptonians out there, and they remain out there when we're done with this arc. It's not like that genie's put back in the bottle. Does that diminish Clark as the last son of Krypton?
See, I don't know, because for me, I have always enjoyed when the Kryptonians have showed up in various forms of media, but also, like, let's just be completely honest here. Obviously, Lois and Clark was a big part of my Kryptonian life, my Superman life growing up, and like it is as canon in my heart as anything. Even as we take it apart and make fun of birth wife. So for me, like that's never been an issue, and it gets us so many other interesting characters throughout the various interpretations. Like he's ours. The moniker of Last Son of Krypton means honestly absolutely nothing to me. The moniker of Man of Tomorrow, Man of Steel, whatever you want to call him in that regard, like that's what it means, and they get to it in this episode too, and I think it's what also buys it back for me, where it's just like he chooses who he's fighting for, and he's fighting for the good people of Krypton, and more importantly, the good people of Earth. And like that's past that, I don't care if they find 3 other planetoids with Kryptonians on it. He's still the only one that we elevate, that we care about in that way.
I agree. I think I agree ultimately. And I appreciate your take and the way you laid that out. And it's like, whether it's a bottle city or it's the Phantom Zone or a la Kandor on Smallville, where they were in that orb, not entirely dissimilar from a bottle, but regardless of the means, right? We've encountered so many instances where there are these other Kryptonians out there.
Here we go again. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And it creates this tension where he is put in this spot where he has to choose. And I feel like it's a particularly interesting choice to present this Clark, the Clark Kent of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, because yes, he has discovered some of his origin. He knows where he's from. He knows the name of his parents, but it's not like we've seen in other incarnations. He doesn't have an Arctic hideout where he goes and he chats with Jor-El, whether it's sort of a friendly familial chat like we've seen in, Superman and Lois and things like that, or very tense like we got on Smallville where Jor-El's
just mean father,
berating him. Yeah. You'll never be Earth's hero. It's like,
you can save Lana, but I'm gonna kill your dad. That version sucks. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And again, to put it in context with the show, he gets Krypton, Jor-El, his name, Laura, like he gets all of that downloaded to him basically in one episode in season 1, and we haven't dealt with it since. And in that way, like this is a huge culture shock. I don't know if that's the right term, but like this is a huge moment for him where like this part of his life, this origin for him comes back and really bites him in the ass in every single way. And like for that drama alone, I'm totally into it. And then obviously in other versions, like I like Kara, I like Jack Sur, like I like what these characters bring to the story. I've always been open to that. It's so funny to me when like you hear, and I'd love to know from you, like, was this the era of DC Comics where it's like, no, he's the last son, that's like he's the only one from Krypton, that's it, no other Kryptonians?
Oh yeah, yes, a whole very much so.
Okay, yeah. Which is another, I love this show being like, yeah, okay, we'll see. But like that is such a weird hill to die on for me, where it's like, why do you want to deny these other characters and deny that, like, even though he's not the last son of Krypton, that he could go out and have this life. Clark Kent made his life here. This is where Clark Kent lives. This is the world that Clark Kent cares about. So he's going to stay and do what he can to protect it.
You bring up some great points when you talk about how, why deny these things. I actually used the word undeniable in the last episode talking about Kandor. And this is the point I made because during that post-crisis triangle era period of the comics, there was this mandate that Clark was going to be, Kal-El was going to be the only Kryptonian, but that didn't, we still had a Supergirl. We still had a Zod. We ended up with a Crypto. They bent over backwards to bring in kind of alternate versions, right? Whether it's from a pocket dimension or the Phantom Zone or whatever, but
clone weird, whatever, alien goo. Yeah.
But the effect was the same. So my point was, it's like, I think certain things kind of are undeniable, and why not just go all in on it as opposed to
let yourself enjoy it. Yeah, exactly.
And I really like what you said about culture shock, because the thing that I wrestled with a little bit is if this were a Clark who had more of a connection to his home world, might that make the tension and the dilemma stronger? But I like what you said, because you do get that culture shock, and you wouldn't necessarily have that if he's been training at the fortress with Jor-El and he's been learning Kryptonian ways. Then you would kind of short circuit that part of it. So I like the way this plays here. And it's also like, here's the thing. And I think this cuts both ways, that there hasn't been much Krypton on the show so far. So it's like, now here it is. This is the part of his life that really hasn't been explored yet on the show. And here it is in full force, and he has to make this choice. And I'm just glad they did it. I'm really glad that they went there.
I am too. And again, it speaks to the character for me. And again, like I let's include her in this too, because it is, as we say, it's their choice. But like, as you're saying, like if he had gone to the fortress, if we'd seen, David Warner as Jor-El more throughout the years, and he'd had other out of, intergalactic threats and whatnot, this would be a little more possibly palatable to them, or like something that he'd thought about more, where like here it is this baffling thing that's come out of nowhere, and he still chooses to go with them because it is like holistically at that point the right thing to do. And it's a great exercise for the character.
It really is. And so that second episode, so much of that is this back and forth and deciding what to do. And I agree, Terry Hatcher has some great, we'll get to the kind of the high drama of it, but there's some great comedic moments, and you hit on a number of them already. I think my favorite, and I actually rewound and I watched it again, is when they're in one of the offices at the Daily Planet, and they're talking with Zara and Ching, and Clark makes this point. He's like, hey, keep talking about this Lord Nor. How do we know you're not with Lord Nor? And Lois is like, yes, that's right. Good, Clark.
Good, Clark. Yeah. I thought you were going to do, she's like, well, I talked to Kal-El about it before, not with our mind, but with our mouths.
That
like
was
we
great
do
too.
here.
That was great
That
too.
thing. Meanwhile, I love that 10-year-old you was terrified of Roger Daltrey running around as Tez, as Kal-El. You've become a wizard.
Yeah, it doesn't hit the same now as
I bet.
adult. But I guess in fairness, so right again, the at this point, the still unseen Lord Nor has sent this assassin Tez to take out Kal-El,
who is, let's be very clear, not Kryptonian. That's a big part of dealing with Tez, is knowing that.
Yeah, he's not Kryptonian. I guess in fairness, we come to learn, right? He has this ability. He sort of learns from the encounters that he has, and his powers grow. And
it's almost an Amazo-ish type thing, but he can almost mimic or somehow copy a power. Yeah.
Yes. So in a sense, maybe he was a good choice, but at the same time, as I'm watching this, I'm like, why did you send this guy? I mean, because initially Clark would be able to make short work of him, but for his shape-shifting ability, and that does lead to a very humorous moment. So I have to say, one of the things that was just so funny to me, I don't know, mileage may vary on this, maybe people thought this was silly, but when Tez transforms into Martha, and she's there in the apartment, I thought that was so funny.
Hey, Callan, killing it. Like, supposedly Martha comes to Clark's apartment to comfort him, but she's Tez, and she's trying to kill him, and like throwing steel pokers and stuff into his back, and he's just having a tense day, and he's like, Mom, whatever you're doing is great. And she's just getting more and more pissed. And I love that whole thing. He also becomes Jimmy later on too, at the planet. Like you were talking about the moment that scared you. And there's just like a cool aspect to that, where it's like, it is obviously the most alien threat we've ever faced on this show, which brings its own kind of level of sci-fi fun to play. And the fact that, like, when he's weaker, he can't conceal everything, so it's always his hand that changes first. So I think Jimmy and Martha at one point have like the weird ugly hand and that type of thing. I think it's really fun. And again, it's Roger Daltrey. Like, it's bizarre casting, and he's having a ball with it.
Yeah, he totally went for it. Yeah, the scene with the massage was fantastic. And then they have a little skirmish, right? And then the landlady comes to the door, and while Tez is behind the door, he shapeshifts into this very attractive blonde woman, and the landlady opens the door, and it's like Clark is grabbing this woman, and he's like, "You're not going anywhere." And she's like, "Mr. Kent, no means
you were
no."
engaged to Miss Lane. Yeah, no means no, Mr. Kent.
Yeah, it was, that's the thing. Again, these 4 episodes, man, they really run the gamut, because you get some really emotional moments where we're tearing up. You get some very comedic moments. You get action to the level that this show is able to realize it. Right. Yeah. I mean, it hit on so much. So all of that was a ton of fun. And then again, Clark has to make this decision, and you hit on this scene earlier, but he and Lois go to talk to Jonathan and Martha. And this has come up on the show, and this has come up on social media recently, because, renowned comic book writer Mark Waid, who wrote my favorite take on the Superman origin story, Birthright, he's gone on record on this show and on other shows and interviews as not liking Jonathan and Martha being alive. He doesn't like the idea that Clark can go to them for advice.
Crazy to me. I love Mark Waid. I have such differing opinions from him sometimes, but yeah.
Same, man. Same. Like it breaks my heart to hear that, because I look at a scene like this, and like that's perfect to me, right? Like that he would go to them with this life-altering decision that he and Lois are facing. And to your point earlier, Martha talks about how they marched for civil rights. And so I love that you get that piece of history, and she talks about how, people told us.
Of course they did, because they're the best people in the world,
Yeah, and that's it. Like, you see where all of this comes from, and then even Jonathan, where he's like, I often thought about what I would say, like if I had a son who was called to war, right? If you were drafted, and the question would be, is this your fight, right? So I love, oh man, I think that's one of the other things, because Smallville was so formative. And we spent so much time with John Schneider and Annette O'Toole, and they're always number one in my heart. But when I go back and I watch this, I'm like, this Jonathan and Martha, man, they were great.
Yep, MVP of the series is Kate Callan for me, like hands down. I feel the same way, and it's so nice to look as the seasons went on. This show prioritized its extended cast less and less, and by that I mean Jimmy and Perry and the Kents. And it's so nice to see them have the Kents. Jimmy and Perry still have shit to do in these episodes, but see them really have something to do and play into his decision making, or the peril and whatnot. Obviously, in the start of season 4, and just let them have the importance in the story that they have in his life naturally. It's lovely.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, Clark ultimately decides, or he and Lois decide, that he'll go, right? If there's a chance that he could save lives and stop this war, of course he's going to go. I have to give the show credit, because one of the things as I finished the end of season 3, I was like, they focus so much on what he and Lois are giving up, their life together, their marriage, understandably. And that's where the heart of this is. But it's also that Earth is losing its protector. And I was saying to myself, I feel like that's not really being fully taken into account here. But then, and I'm jumping ahead, but at the start of season 4, there's that guy at the planet who asks Lois out on the date, and then, they're going back and forth. And he has this whole thing about like, well, hey, he left us here. And Lois defends that choice. And she's like, of course he thought about that, and he hated to go. And I felt like that was the show like addressing the exact little critique that I had.
Yeah.
So
everybody shut up. He had to do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's also, and I forget if it's the first or second episode, but there's a really great exchange between Ching and Lady Zara, who they have their own thing going on, and this romance that they have not been able to explore with each other. But Ching says to her, he's like, I don't understand. Like, he's hiding behind this pair of glasses. Like, he should be ruling these people and showing them the Kryptonian way. And like, why isn't he? And Zara says, perhaps there's a higher lesson to be learned here. And it was such a great moment, because look, whenever, and I know as Superman fans, we often get this question like, oh, why Superman? And it's like, well, one of the reasons is that this is a guy with the power of a god who could do anything. And this is what he chooses to do. He chooses to be part of humanity and protect humanity, and knows that just because he can do something, just because he can exert his will on people, doesn't mean he should. And I just like that there was that moment between them, and there's this notion of there's a higher lesson here that people need to take into account. I just thought was great.
Yep. It's the fun part of like being a huge fan of the DC lore in general, where it's like Batman is the human being who rejected normalcy and it made himself extraordinary. Whereas Superman is the extraordinary who just wants to be ordinary, who just wants the white picket fence, who, like, when we find out in Crisis that Tom Welling gave up his power, we're like, yep, makes sense. Good for you. But, like, that this is what he wants. It's why I hate things like Kill Bill is a great movie, whatever. But like that whole take on like, Clark Kent is his characterization of humanity or whatever. I'm like, no, it's who he is. Like that, it's the part of me that, oh God, that doesn't connect with the Christopher Reeve movies as much, because I'm like, he's not himself in either role there. Like, it's somewhere in between, and that kind of hurts me. Where like I love this show for showing me at a very young age a Clark Kent that is as himself as he possibly can be when he's got glasses and a tie on at the Daily Planet.
Listen, Matt, this is a safe space here. I have a lot of love and respect and appreciation for the Christopher Reeve portrayal and the Donner movies. At the same time, I don't and have never worshipped at the altar of them the way I know a lot of folks do. And the thing that has always been the roadblock for me is exactly what you described. I've said this a lot on the podcast, so I don't want to sound like a broken record. The thing that unlocked it for me was just kind of shifting my perspective and just recognizing the version of the character I grew up with. Triangle era, Lois and Clark, Smallville. It's a man with the powers of a god. And I look at what I had to realize was, okay, looking at the Reeve performance, it's a god living among men. And once I sort of shifted, I was like, okay, it's still not, I guess, what I gravitate towards the most, but I at least was able to kind of make my peace with it. And there's so much to enjoy in those movies. But as you're saying
and
all
just
of that,
not to go ahead.
no. Because I know it's like, look, whenever we bring up these opinions, it's like, oh my God, like we have to tread very carefully. But it's like, I get it, man. I get it.
To be clear, too, Christopher Reeve, incredibly talented actor, the most talented actor that has ever put on the cape. Like, hands down, no argument there. It's just that take on the character that he was given in a script when he was cast is not my favorite. Yes.
Yeah, no, I hear you. No, I mean, and Lois and Clark, I think I often, it's like you've spent so much time with the show and you talked about every episode in depth. So,
yeah, I don't recall. Okay.
But it's like, I haven't gone through that process, but whenever I do revisit the show, I think what I realize and what I realize more and more each time is how formative this show was in shaping how I saw the character. Because did it have all of the comic book elements from the stories I was reading at the time? No, but in terms of focusing on Clark is who he is. Superman is what he can do. This core cast at the Daily Planet, these Metropolis set stories, that was very much in keeping with the comics at the time. So it was, although I know we're talking about distinctions, especially in terms of other Kryptonians and things like that, but so much of it did kind of line up and brought to life what I was reading in the pages. And so I do have to remind myself, like, no, I think this was more formative for me than I often realize, especially how young I was watching it, and think about all this. I forgot more than I remember, but like, it still makes that impression. I have to ask you this question. So this show makes a big point about how Clark is a virgin, right? And has saved himself for marriage, and that Lois and Clark, they have not consummated their relationship. So much so that the episode after the wedding, which you and I talked about because it's a Tempest episode, is all about how this curse will
they're ready to bone. Knock, knock, knock. H2Ls. Yeah,
exactly. Here's where I call BS. I do not buy.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
That the night before he leaves, when they're going at it and you see them through the window and they're kissing passionately as they always do, I do not buy that nothing else happened that night. I refuse to accept that.
I'm so with you. I also don't think the show fully accepted it in season 3 until they got to that story and that they wanted to do in season 4. Like that is the proper way, I think, to read that scene. It's only later on in continuity that we go like, oh, I guess they didn't. But that is, to me, literally his last night on Earth. And like, they basically pan to the wafting curtain in the corner and like, they do it totally.
Even, and on top of that, he even says to her, he's like, in my heart, I am your husband. And she's like, I am your wife. So it's like, even if you want to read like, well, they were waiting for marriage, they're basically saying, well, all right, we're married.
Also, totally legally, I think they are married because he married a clone that signed the wedding certificate. Like, I'm pretty sure this is a done deal.
It's funny because it's especially egregious with these two because they are, and for all of the Loises and Clarks that we've had, all of the pairings.
Lois High and Clark, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is there any, Tom Welling and Erica Durance are up there, but is there any other pair that even comes close in terms of heat? I mean, I'm not talking, nope, they have some chemistry, but I mean like sexual heat.
Nope. That is, let's be very clear, that is what got this show through the 4 seasons that it had. It is their chemistry. And I am one that will never know until someone writes their tell-all book or whatever. I don't know that they were the best friends in real life, but god damn do they photograph well together. And they really, really do have that incredible chemistry. I agree with you on half of the Smallville formula. I think Erica Durance can have chemistry with a wall. Like she is so good, especially when we do like flash forwards and she's just so hot for her husband or whatever, like, the guy that she knows is Superman at that point. Tom Welling does not have the kind of soap opera romancy heat that Dean Cain did in the 90s, and the two of them together in this show is unstoppable. It's why just like for anyone that didn't listen to my show, one of my favorite things throughout doing my whole podcast was meeting fans of Lois and Clark from like back in the day that would come on and have no give a shit whatsoever about the comics or other versions. And like maybe they saw Man of Steel or they saw, Christopher Reeve on reruns or whatever, but like would have watched Terry and Dean play anyone. It was just about their chemistry.
That's, it's funny. We were talking off mic about this, but that's as I get deeper into this podcast and you kind of come to meet all these different pockets of fandom out there. It's like any incarnation of the character that's existed. There are fans and and within those pockets, there are fans who are fans of the character and enjoy other interpretations. And there are fans who just like that incarnation. It's all
who
valid.
Live or die for Smallville or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. What have I not encountered yet? I don't think I've met any like diehard Kirk Allen fans. Poor Kirk Allen. But I'm sure maybe there's got to be some out there.
They died off, like in fairness. They existed at one point. And the ones that were just like, if it didn't happen on the radio serial, it didn't happen. Like we've always been an annoying people as Superman fans.
It's true. No, but I think like after Reeve, Dean Cain, obviously Tom Welling, Henry Cavill. It's I'm sure fans now, Tyler Hoechlin will be the only
Tyler.
Yeah, be the only one.
Brandon somewhere. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, poor Brandon. I'm so sorry. I left him off that list. I know.
Love you so much, Brandon.
Yeah, for sure. This episode made possible in part by educator, hobby comic book collector, and pop culture enthusiast Sam Lim. Sam is based in the South Jersey area and is looking to connect with other comics fans as well as retailers. They're also looking for comic shops to explore, so recommendations are welcome. Be sure to follow Sam on Instagram at SZL Comics to see their latest comic pickups and shop adventures. Filmmakers and movie fans alike should be sure to attend these film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and Round Reel in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Take it from an alum of two of them. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and more. Also, listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. I loved, we already talked about that farewell scene where he's saying goodbye, particularly to Jonathan and Martha, and it's a tearjerker. I love when he says goodbye to the people, right, in the Daily Planet bullpen.
At the Planet, yeah.
Yeah, because it's such a nice callback to the pilot, right, when he has that remains in the opening credits. And I love the message to the people of, and I'm paraphrasing, but essentially like, you got to be your own hero now. You need to
take care of yourselves.
Take care of yourselves. Look within yourself. Yeah, I like that so much.
Yep. Do you like the call out in the Jimmy brings the layout for that day's issue of the Daily Planet to Perry of like, we're ready to run with this downstairs and it's a world without Superman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the
storyline that wouldn't have happened without this stupid show. Yeah.
But yeah,
the snake eating its tail of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, as someone who the death of Superman means a lot to me, to see the world without Superman headline and then to see him in the black suit at the end of this, it's fantastic. Before we get to the black suit, I know, like we said, Perry and Jimmy, not a ton to do in these episodes. There's this quick moment of, Clark couldn't be here for Superman's farewell. And Superman's like, he knows how I feel.
Clark knows how I feel.
Yeah, I've always, and I've said this a bunch of times, I always, in my heart, Jimmy's probably not too quick on the uptake, so I believe that he's fooled. In my heart, Perry always knows.
I agree. I agree. There's no textual evidence to back this up on this show. In fact, a lot to the contrary. So he's either the best actor in the show or it didn't happen. But yes, in the same way that Gordon knows.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But yes, let's talk about the black suit. So what I have to say, I do for anyone who like wants more of this. I mean, they should check out your show generally, but especially that arc talk that you did about this. Cause
I'm so glad you liked this episode. Yeah, I have no memory of it. It was the height of quarantine.
Yes. You talked about that. You're like, and I looked at the date. So I was like, oh yeah, these guys are like in it at the time, but I mean, not that you would know from the rest of the episode. It was a great episode, but it was cool. It was cool getting Craig's take, Craig from Krypton site, because he, like I said, I watched this when it first aired, but I was so young. I mean, he was
Totally.
in it and he was in the fandom and he could speak to kind of what the reactions were and what the speculation was like over the summer and all of that. So it was cool to get that perspective. But yeah, I mean, for you then and now, what's your take on the black suit?
Oh, I think it's awesome. It is the again, it's this show's version of it. It's got the blue and the sparkly cuffs and the little sparkle blue toes and whatnot. But I am someone who is just like ride or die for his costume in general on this show. And I totally get not. My wife calls it pajamas, and I'm like, shut up, but I understand. But like for me, it this is like when I close my eyes and think of Superman, it is like Dean Cain in that costume, and to see it translated into this and have that big fun bubbly S still in that like slightly more, I don't know the right word here, utilitarian, regal, militaristic, whatever version of the suit, the like, no color kind of back to business Superman suit here. I think it's super cool. And the fact too that it is the most blatant attempt for this show to be like, hey nerds, we see you. We read a book too. We know what to do here. I think that's really cool as an artifact out of this show too.
No, absolutely. It's so cool. I mean, look, no, it's not a direct adaptation of the death and return of Superman. But once again, and this is the themes have become a theme because thematically it taps into a lot of those ideas, right? Of a world without Superman and Lois mourning, right? He's not dead, but he's gone for a period of time. So it taps into a lot of that. And so it's fitting that it would make its appearance here and totally in line with he's on the ship and he's with the other Kryptonians. And yeah, I like the design. Yes, the blue, it was different than what was on the comic, but it was still very much in keeping with it. And as much of a big deal as that black suit was in the comics, we've not seen it a ton of other places, right? Obviously, Clark's season 9 suit on Smallville suit, his outfit is black, but it's not
Matrix cosplay. Yeah,
it's not. I'm a fan, but we didn't get all the way there. And then obviously the Snyder cut, and even there, it's like he had to sneak that in. He had to shoot Cavill in the blue suit and then change it after,
and then color time it down. Yeah, no, I think it's very cool. It's also a great. They give it a moment. Like there is basically a scene devoted to like, this is the suit now, at least for the next couple episodes here. And it is just like, because the Krypton stuff is so slow rolled, because we only meet the two Kryptonians in season 3, you don't necessarily see it coming, but then you realize like they've just been wearing black with little color accents throughout. So like I think it's an honestly really cool aesthetic payoff for this show that didn't get to do that very much. And though I'm aesthetically obsessed with this show, like it is not about that in most episodes. So they give it a moment to shine here. I think it's really cool.
It is. And look, we've all seen how superhero costumes have evolved generally, but I think it's a testament to these actors who wore costumes before the modern era.
Before muscle suits, really.
George Reeves and Christopher Reeve and Dean Cain, credit where credit's due, because, and I always use poor Kirk Allen as this example. I feel so bad, but like you watch.
Take him down. Do it.
No, you watch those. That's okay. But like,
throw him down with the mole people.
Those old, that was Reeves. But
oh, you're right. Shit. No, see, I'm losing all my credit.
No. It's all good. It's all good. But I always use this example where you watch those movie serials, for me at least, and when Kirk Allen is running around in that Superman costume, it's like it looks like a guy running around in a Superman costume. But then when you look at George Reeves in essentially the same costume standing there, you say, "Oh, that's Superman." And that's that. And same thing with Christopher Reeve and Dean Cain too. Again, credit where credit's due, where it's like, it's no easy thing to pull that off, especially without the advantages of the modern costumes.
Yeah.
And to look at them and feel like, okay, I can buy, this is the guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's something. Not everybody can do that.
I have nothing but contempt for modern Dean Cain. Him in the 90s in that suit, I love to death. Like I think he looks awesome, and he's the last actor that did it without any padding. Like that is just him in spandex, and he looks great. And I get what you mean too. Whereas like I am unapologetic for loving Superman Returns, but Brandon Routh is so made up in that like in close-ups, like kind of all I can see is the makeup and the wig and stuff. Like it is not the same effect for me as seeing Dean in either one of these stupid pajama cutlery suits. I love them so much.
No, fair enough. So, now we're into the second half of this. And again, I know we've jumped. We've already
just 2 hours into the podcast. We're doing great.
We're not even at the hour and a half mark. We're doing great.
Yeah, whatever.
But we've already hit on a number of key points. But these first couple of episodes of season 4 introduce us to Lord Nor. This Kryptonian.
Do you know this actor from anything else? This is Simon Templeton.
Oh, and I looked him up, and there was something that he did that I was familiar with, but now I've totally forgotten. But whatever.
No worries. I knew him. I know him from Lois and Clark first and foremost, I guess. But in later life, like he's shown up on genre television. He was in Charmed for a bit. He was in Angel. Like he's just like one of those guys that's done an episode of everything, and is clearly a like Shakespearean trained actor and a theater guy, and brings all of that to these couple episodes where like he is damn near close to a Tempest or a Luther from this show for me, John Wells or Lane Davies, where it's just like he understood the tone. He could bring the funny where he needed to, and he is genuinely funny throughout these 2 episodes, while also being genuinely menacing and like, cruel and mean. I think he just knocks it out of the park. Am I the only one here?
No.
Oh, okay. I couldn't read your face at all there while I was doing that.
No, I was just letting your words wash over me. I was taking it all in. No, I really, this has just turned into one big love fest, but I had so much fun with these episodes, and I very much enjoy the character. And so as we're at the beginning of season 4, Clark's been gone. He's on the ship. He's learning these customs and really struggling. And there's this unity ceremony, and he's meant to consummate the relationship, but he and Zara have this conversation, and they're going to be partners on the throne, but not in the bedroom, all of this.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, while they're going through this whole process and heading back to New Krypton, Nor has sent his minions to Smallville because they've been able to track that's where Kal-El's ship had landed. So what you would think would have been a big secret is something that they're able to discover. Like
something very they've just got on Kryptonian Wikipedia somehow. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he sent his minions there, and then eventually he makes his big big entrance here. And no, I agree. I mean, I feel like, yeah, it can't be an over the top in the Lois and Clark ways that you would want, but moments that are genuinely funny and genuinely threatening and intimidating. When we get to the end of the season 4 premiere, when Clark reveals himself as Superman in Smallville, but in disguise, and he's like, "What do you want?" And the music's thumping, and Lord Nor's like, "I want your throne. I want your world. I want your life." It's like, oh man, like it was a powerful note to go out on.
Yep, I agree, and also keep in mind, again, this is the razor edge that the show walks on, where it's like when it's funny as hell, and sometimes it falls flat, but I think it really chooses its moments well in these few episodes where like this is a guy who earlier has done a Wizard of Oz reference where they're, he's taking over the town of Smallville, but like, well, that's not how we do things in Kansas. Well, I'm afraid we're not in Kansas anymore. Like that type of thing. And he does like this morning show where he's got like sunglasses and a lav mic on his big stupid tire vest, and he's like, well, Kelly, I'm just trying to bring a little order to the barbaric people of this planet. Nothing more than that. And it like the tones that he gets to play, he gets like the best villain intro of the entire series for me, aside from Lex Luthor, frankly. And he doesn't waste it. The actor is brilliant, and I only wish the show had gone on and hadn't killed him. Like they would have brought him back in some way, shape, or form.
I know that is a bummer. So he very much fills the role of a General Zod. He's not.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah,
yes.
Go for it.
Well, how do you feel about this? Because there's a version of this where they got the okay from DC Comics, who I can only imagine said absolutely not at some point, and they replaced Lord Nor for General Zod. would you have preferred that here?
It's like you might expect me to say, yeah, it really should have been General Zod. I don't know. I'm fine with this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with it. Maybe because it is, I grew up during this period of the comics where they had to find all of these other ways around various restrictions. But I don't know. I mean, Noir is doing his own thing here. And there's also, look, it could have very easily been Zod. At the same time, though, it's like I feel like the effect would have been the same. But also with Zod, if everything else had been the same, but it had been Zod, then you lose the whole dynamic of him having been imprisoned. I mean, then if it had been Zod, maybe they would have worked that in, right?
Yeah.
But then that changes the dynamic. Like this whole idea is he wants to marry Zara and rule. I mean, obviously Zod wants to rule too, but I don't know. There's enough of a distinction here where I'm like, no, this was kind of in its own lane. If it had been Zod and he wasn't an escapee from the Phantom Zone or whatever, then I don't know. Then it's not really Zod anyway. How do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. I know. I agree very much. And part of this too, honestly, is Man of Steel in my head, where it's just like in that, Zod is the most Kryptonian that ever Kryptonianed. Whereas like here, it's like, this is just an asshole. This is an asshole with a little bit of power and a title who is going to twist his own law and culture to his will to then gain more power. Like for me, and I'm sure there are versions of the character that are this, but I'm like, for me, that's not what Zod was necessarily. Zod was not as self-serving as this, whereas like this is just some new jerk like Clark would have faced on Earth, possibly. Like this is Tempest again. This is just someone grabbing for power, smartly and with a plan, and does a pretty good job of it. But it's not Zod to me. And personally, there's part of me that, like, as someone who loves the show and wants to see it kind of included in the conversation more, thank you again, would love it just for like, now you've got to include him on all your damn listicles of all, like, when you rate all the Zods. But at the same time, I'm like, he's his own thing. He gets to be the show's creation, and he's just kind of like kept in the bubble over here, and in its own perfect version of a Kryptonian villain.
I echo all of that, because I think you're right with Zod. Zod's about something in a way that's very principled, and yes, the means that he chooses in order to pursue that are questionable and obviously
problematic.
Put him at odds with Superman.
Let's say it.
But his sole reason for being is the preservation of Krypton and the Kryptonian people, and he will go to extreme lengths for that. I agree with you. This is more of this power hungry, would be ruler who's living it up here, which
just a jerk.
Which I have to say was funny, having just watched Krypton. That's again Zod and a very just militant, single-minded, focused Zod. And
incredible Zod, yeah.
He's a great Zod, but even his soldiers ultimately turn on him by the end.
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm watching that, I'm saying to myself, I kind of get it. It doesn't seem real fun serving Zod.
Point.
It's like, what, it's like there don't seem to be many perks to this. Whereas you watch this, and he's letting them kind of tear it up in Smallville, and you kind of feel like, okay, I get why these guys. I mean, I wouldn't, but I get why these guys follow him. So there's an element of fun there. Again, though, as far as taking over and kind of tearing up a small town, very reminiscent of Superman 2.
Yes, very much so. And again, it's still Lois and Clark, where it's still silly, and like his lieutenants are flying around drinking pina coladas out of coconut or at pineapples and that type of thing. Like it's all still this show's tone of it. And maybe it's even because of that where I'm like, yeah, you got to do your own thing. You've got to. This version of Superman works really well just against a selfish jerk in whatever version that takes,
Yeah.
Whether it's prankster or whether it's a Kryptonian that can match him power, and who is a master at the Dre, the of course fabled, very famous Kryptonian weapon, as as a scholar, I'm sure.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, no, I think it works. And look, to your point, I mean, yeah, Tempest, perhaps as we had discussed, the ultimate villain of this series, and something that they came up with. And I'm not aware of any instance of Noor being used or referenced anywhere else. I mean, like I said, I'd
have to know. Yeah.
I'll be reading that new Krypton arc very shortly, and there's a lot of Kryptonians there. So if there's a reference anywhere, I'll be on the lookout
Please let me
for it.
know.
But,
have you, at this total tangent for a second, have you ever read The Last Days of Krypton? It's a book. It's a novel.
I have not. I know of it, but no, I haven't read it.
Lovely take on things. And not that Noor's in there, but I'm just like, as you're going through here, maybe it's too late to add something in. But it's a really cool take that kind of amalgamates kind of everything, you know?
Nice.
Yeah.
And I'll
shut up now. Sorry.
No, that's what we're here for, man. No, I love it. And I like too that, again, we're a la Superman 2, we're in a small town, but that it's Smallville. I love that it's Smallville because that raises the stakes. And Jonathan and Martha are there, and we have that personal connection, and he puts up that force field. Before Lois and Clark infiltrate, we do get this great moment. And again, the music is just so on point here. When Clark returns to the Daily Planet and marches in, and Jimmy's like, they brought Superman back.
In the new suit, too.
In the new suit. Oh, it was, and, you know, again, Jimmy doesn't have a lot to do, but he wants one of those cool black suits. He talks about how he's cut down his body fat percentage and all that.
It's cute.
But it was great. Like,
Harry's all pissed off. This is still my newsroom. What are we doing here?
Yeah. And look, in that scene and the scenes on the ship, the tension continues to mount where the Kryptonians clearly feel that Kal-El's loyalties are not where they should be, right? Where he's concerned about Earth and the people he's left behind and not the new Krypton that he should be focusing on. So that's certainly a theme throughout. And we also get a beat, which ends up being important for later. I think it's in that scene at the Daily Planet where kryptonite at Star Labs has been stolen.
Yes,
right. You assume that
thing.
Yeah, you would assume that one of the new Kryptonians had been tipped off and that they were behind it. That ends up being not the case, which we'll get to. But the question for you, and maybe I missed something: how do Lois and Clark get past the dome?
Oh, unclear. Completely unclear. It's still the show. There's still plot holes galore throughout here. But yeah, the force field around. How do they get under the dome? I couldn't tell you.
All right. Did you like them?
I know the dome can be made penetrable by thought transmission.
Yes.
You know, there's clearly, you know, variations. The dome has a couple notches on it. But yeah, no, it's just the show being the show and caring until caring is slightly inconvenient, and then it just does its own thing.
Fair enough. Somehow they make it under the dome, and you know, he's not Clark, he's Superman.
Yeah. He's Superman,
street clothes,
in a disguise, no glasses, Buffalo Bill's hat, of course, because Dean Cain, and slyly, covertly doing like good things for the people and like digging a well real quick. Like, I love that.
Yeah, that was really cool. Yeah, so
cool.
So you like that whole sequence of them undercover in Smallville?
Yeah, absolutely. And just the idea that like that is, again, his goal. Of course his parents are there. Obviously there's the emotional connection here, but like this is ground zero. He has to be here, and his first thought is, let's try to stabilize these people that are trapped here. That's Superman. That's my guy, you know?
And I what I appreciated too is that, you know, once he returns to Earth, and especially when he somehow gets under this dome, you know, the instinct maybe is, oh, you want to see this big brawl, right, between him and Noor and the other guys. But there are all of these civilians. So there are certain production and budgetary constraints that they're working within, right? But story-wise, it works. Like, you get why he doesn't just start throwing punches here. So
also, theoretically, he's one Superman now against 10 or 20 of them. Like,
yeah, well,
the odds aren't great. Let's learn some intel.
And he gets punched at one point, and you see him like he feels it. He's never been hit like that. Yeah, no, I thought that was cool, and I think you guys talked about this in your episode, but you know,
I should have listened to this.
It was a helpful background, and I was curious to get, you know, what you guys were thinking about everything, and it prompts other thoughts and questions of, you know, how would the people of Smallville not put it together that Clark is Superman?
Yeah.
But I kind of like that too. A la my Perry thing. I kind of like the idea that this small town, they kind of know who their hero is, and
Knows
it's
that
like
weird things were happening. Yeah, I get that, but the show is also careful not to call him Clark in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Like clearly he cares maybe a little too much about the Kents here and is hanging around with Lois Lane quite a bit. But as we know, Superman and Lois Lane, good pals. Clark would have been here if he could, but he's out covering some other crap that's happening, I guess. I don't know. I'm cool with it either way, I guess, especially after 10 years of a show called Smallville, where like, if you are living in that town and you don't know that seeing Clark Kent when your house is on fire is a good sign, then you're stupid, It goes to, I hope I didn't mention this in this episode, I don't remember, but it goes to, I was a big Buffy fan, and and Buffy, it's kind of the same thing where like she's the one hero in this town where there's crap going on all the time. And at the prom, at like graduation, basically, she gets gifted the Class Protector Award. And they're very open about it, but also very vague about it, where it's just like, we know this town is weird and people die here all the time. She always seems to be there and helping people. And I'm like, maybe it's that, where it's just like they can't quite put a finger on it, but they know that Clark was special and was a soldier of good in some way.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought up Buffy, because this was another thing I was thinking about. When we talk about the limitations of superhero television and 90s superhero television, this show in particular. Look, man, I grew up watching Xena and Hercules and Buffy and the other shows where they worked with what they had. And no, it wasn't always the most polished or the most visually stunning, but they worked with what they had, and the stories and the characters were compelling. And that's the way I feel about this show. And look, again, I'm going through the George Reeves show as well. And, anytime I have a critique of that show, sometimes it has to do with, something doesn't make sense or character behavior doesn't totally line up, but it's never like, oh, that looked cheap or anything visually, because it's like, look, this was a very different time, and they were making this show fast with like no money.
I was gonna say, you tried doing this for $30 in the 50s, like good luck.
Yeah, so I think the intent and again these other components here, that's what matters. So when we watch this and you look at some with the ship, or the ship going towards Metropolis, and regardless of they did the best they could.
I love that shit.
I get
it. You see the seams and everything here, but it is totally part of the charm for the show for me, where it's like they very much lean into the artifice of everything, into the heightened world of what comics are, of what the Superman story is. And I think that really buys you a lot of those more theatrical, and I mean theatrical like theater, like proscenium elements of things, where it's like, yeah, we all know that this is the Warner Brothers backlot, and they exist within like less than like a half-mile square radius of everything. But who cares? They're doing it, and they dropped a car on the set, and they flipped someone over, and those guys are on wires, and they're going for it.
Yeah, no, man, absolutely. That premiere also introduces us to the general who tries to breach the force field and is unable to. And spoiler alert, we find out he's the one responsible for the theft of the kryptonite. Now, easy to Monday morning quarterback this so many years later. Watching this, it's like I couldn't help but say to myself, man, I wish their take on Lois's father had been General Sam Lane, because that would have added a whole other dimension to this.
Whole other dimension to this would have been very interesting, especially Sam Lane that doesn't know he's Superman and is very willing to unknowingly use kryptonite on his basically son-in-law at that point. I'm also like, at this point, there's enough nerds in the writer's room for this show where I'm like, call him fucking Eiling. Like, this is the one where I'm like, give it to him, because there's no character assassination. There's no nothing here where it's just like, we know Eiling is a jerk and is willing to do this type of thing at the drop of a hat. Why not do it? And this is the part where you again show that I'm a bad fan and tell me that Eiling wasn't created till like 2003 or something. But like this is the one where I'm like, yes, we could have used a little more comic book love here, because there's nothing but shady government characters in the DC lore.
Yeah, it was a bummer because when we get to the conclusion here, we find out that again he has the kryptonite and he's weaponized it into this kryptonite gas.
Yeah.
And when again I'm skipping ahead, but when Superman and Lord Nor have their battle, he's prepared to use this kryptonite gas, and Lois finds out, and they have this confrontation, and like it works fine, but you can't help but think, man, if that had been her father,
how cool!
How cool!
How cool if that was the moment where she had to go like, "Daddy, it's Clark."
Yep.
Amazing. Would have been so cool. But they had obviously already, that ship had sailed long before this episode.
I know. But so as we kind of build towards the conclusion here, again, Clark reveals himself, turns himself in, and we have this whole trial. Now,
I love this trial.
The trial was great. No, I have to amend what I said earlier. One other thing that I do remember from watching this as a kid is not so much the trial itself, but when he is sentenced and is in the process of being executed, i.e. disintegrated with his molecules.
Spread across all the galaxies and whatever.
That imagery of him being scattered and then pulled back. Like I always remembered that. That was another thing that stood out. I don't know how the science of that would possibly work, but
who cares? Shut up. Yeah, exactly. No, I love that so much. And like, I've probably talked about it somewhere before, but I first saw these episodes. My parents were on vacation. It was in reruns on TNT. And basically I was like being hopped around from various family members' houses, like as they were gone. It's like, it'll be nice. You'll spend like 2 days with this aunt and 2 days with this aunt and uncle and whatnot. And I'm like, that's great. As long as everyone has TNT and I can sit down for an hour in the morning and watch this, because this just happened and I don't know what to think. Like literally the day before my parents left was the start of this. And I'm like, my world is rocked, where I'm like, yeah, I'll miss you. Do you know if they survived this? Like it was such a big deal for me. And as much as appointment television can be appointment television and reruns, it totally was that for me. So like this was thrilling. And to get to that episode and to see that moment of him truly losing, of him like as losing as you could possibly be, being retired in Good Place parlance and being scattered across the galaxy, was horrifying to me. Was so like edge of my seat in someone else's living room,
No, for sure. No, I love hearing that though, because those that kind of experience that you just described, that's so formative and is clearly such a memorable part of your fandom and viewing
it might
experience.
have made a dent or so in my psyche. Yeah, totally.
No, like I said, those TNT reruns, I mean, that was huge for me too, no doubt. Because that was late elementary school for me. So I remember like 7th, 8th grade watching that regularly. And
you're just a few years ahead of me. You're like 2 or 3 years ahead of me. Yeah.
What I have to say though, during this trial, so ultimately it comes down to this idea. He's tried and convicted for treason, right? And they have all of these audio and video recordings.
It's awesome, yeah.
Right? They have audio of him and Zara in the bridal chamber talking about how they're not going to consummate the relationship and in turn not produce an heir, which is what they're meant to do. There's audio of him and Lois in the diner in Smallville where he's talking about how once we're done with this, like I'm not going back. There's the video footage of the two of them making out as passionately
at her apartment. Yeah.
And here's the thing. I was gonna kind of complain about like, how are they getting all of this footage? But having gone through all of those Kandor comics, the Kandorians were always watching the goings on Earth on their screens. They had these special telescopes and they were just watching stuff all the time. So you know what? I'll go with it.
The only one that's a stretch for me is the making out footage on the apartment, even though there are other Kryptonians there. But like otherwise, of course, he's going to bug the bridal or the wedding chamber or whatever. Of course, he's going to bug the cell, the diner where he's keeping Clark for all this time. Like it is just pure villain shit to me, where it's just like he knows what he's leading up to, so he's just gathering evidence and setting them up to incriminate themselves, and it works. Yeah. It's great, smart villain stuff because it's so mean and so calculated, and is kind of undeniable on Clark's part. Where like he tries in the trial to be like, that's not exactly what I meant there, but it's like, dude, it's like you literally just said like we're not going to have sex and make an error, and that's the whole part of those.
Yeah, no, absolutely, And Nor really pushes Clark's buttons. I mean, he calls Lois a slut.
Yes.
And
That's
Clark
right.
really loses his temper. And I wish, so there's the later scene before Clark is put in that scattering chamber or whatever we want to call it, where he does grab Nor by the neck. Yeah. I wish he had gotten him after the remark about Lois. I would have maybe put that there, but it works where it is. But even just to see Clark lose it like that was, I appreciated.
It's totally a good moment. There's also a great joke here with Nor where they're like, well, what about Kal-El's appeal? It's like, well, a bit muscular for my taste.
Yes, that was great.
He's still funny. Like this show, it is like the razor's edge thing when it's doing well, and it does it great in these episodes where it's like, how do you make me care and like honestly care that this CG double of Dean Cain is being scattered to the CG wind here, and still laugh throughout the whole thing. Like that's the trick that like we fall in love with these kind of high concept big sci-fi things.
Yeah, and I think, and look, for anyone who's listening to this who like hasn't watched these episodes or hasn't watched them in a while, and maybe we will inspire someone to go and
I hope so. They look beautiful on HBO. They're in full HD except for some of the visuals, the special effects shots.
Yeah, I hope people will go back and do so. I mean, I think hopefully we've prepared everyone enough where you have a sense of what to expect. And I think this, like, look, I'm not going to get into all the Snyder stuff, but I am a fan and I enjoyed what was done there. But yes, I understand people's feelings about the tone there. It is a different tone, but I like what was done there. But I also like having something like this where you can have more of those lighter moments, and it really runs the gamut to the show's credit. So you get a great mix. And yeah, these high stakes as he's being scattered, and then of course one of the elders kind of realizes
arcane Kryptonian Ching gets his one thing to do in these season 4 episodes with this new face.
Yeah, sir, it's trial by combat.
Yeah, he didn't know, therefore it's unlawful or whatever, and they reverse their little gadget, and he comes back, and turns out that Kal-El had the right as a noble to challenge Nor to a duel, essentially, with the Dre sticks. What was your take when we got to this?
This was probably another one of those things not unlike Tez, where in my head, I remember them as being far
super
more
cool.
Impressive. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, like it's kind of a bar with balls on the end. It's like, all right.
It's the American Gladiator Q-tip things with weird, almost like pumpkin bomb, Green Goblin-y balls at the end.
Yeah, but we get this great, it's very humorous, the training scene in Lois's apartment between Ching
the last
and Clark.
time we see Lois's apartment on the show, too. It's crazy to me.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And Zara's trying to help out in the kitchen, but she doesn't know what anything is. And Lois is on the phone trying. Yeah, it was great. And Ching ultimately is able to get the drop on Clark by showing him this maneuver where you can summon this energy and channel it through the what is it called again?
The Dre. Yeah.
But it's or can be a lethal move. It's kind of a last resort. You have to be willing to go there, which of course Clark is not. He says, he doesn't believe in killing, which until yeah, I mean, I guess kind of that really takes us to this final confrontation on the streets of Metropolis between Superman and Nor. And of course, as Superman arrives, he's back in the blue and red.
Back in the blue. You also just see that he's got a chain on him, which we haven't touched on, but like when he leaves Earth, Lois gives him her wedding band that she never got to wear, and he wears it on a chain around his neck for this entire run, basically, after he leaves Earth. And he's still got that on, but it is the first time we've heard the Lois and Clark Superman theme. You see him back in the red and blue, and I have to shout out Rob O'Connor of All Star Superfan again, where he pointed this out to me on my podcast, where it was like, this is the moment where he becomes like truly Superman, where he understands what that role is. He's not playing the part, he is the part at this point. And it's like, Lord Nora asks, who are you fight for? I fight for my people. And that means everybody at that point. And again, like, that's why I don't care that there's other Kryptonians. Nobody else can do what he's doing thematically and whatnot. And it's just such a triumphant thing where, like, You and I like the black suit. He looks super cool in it. Taking it away and giving us that moment with the blue suit again just means all that more. Like he's back, you know?
I agree with that's all very well said. And that is important because it's like this is kind of a final test, right? Especially because the show hasn't given us this part of his character. And even in one of the first episodes, he's talking to Lois about how like this is my heritage. Because she's like, why are you Kryptonian all of a sudden? He's like, well, I always have been. Right. And even though that hasn't been a big part of the show, it's like, yeah, there is this whole other world and life that he doesn't really know about. And now he's being confronted with it. And it is sort of this final test. And I get this idea of, I agree with you, man. I'm kind of like sorting this out in real time, but it's like, yeah, if you have more Kryptonians, then yes, that diminishes the last son of Krypton. Although, side note, and I've talked about this before, but the comic book writer, Kurt Busiek, he's talked about this online of like, last son of Krypton doesn't technically necessarily mean like he's the last, like the sole survivor. It's like the last born son of the planet or something like that. So it's like,
sure. Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily preclude others. But to your point, as you were saying this, it really struck a chord because it's like when you have other Kryptonians, then it allows you to show even more how special Clark is because you have all these others, but there's only one Superman. So I think there can be value in that. And, you know, they have their battle and Clark ultimately does get to the point where he uses this technique, this go for the kill technique that Ching has taught him.
Yes. Okay.
What is your take on this?
My take on this is that he survived this. He has seen Ching do this to him and realize that it is a mental state. It takes more than one shot to do it. He for me, it's very heroic where it's like, it's him understanding the stakes of what's going on and him channeling all that frustration and energy into that moment and doing it. And this is me reading way the hell into Lois and Clark. Let's be very clear. But it like he knows it as a survivable thing. He takes him out. He incapacitates him. That's what he's trying to do. I don't think that this Clark is trying to actually kill this guy. In fact, when Lois, after he does the kill shot, and Lois is kind of turned on by it, she's also like, hey, they're about to shoot you with kryptonite gas. This is a bad place to be. And he's like, I've got to get Nora out of here.
Yeah. And
like that's it. He has no desire to kill this person. He has to incapacitate him. And of course he has to punch harder, you know, essentially than he ever has before. And he does it. And like he wins the day and still should be General Eiling, you know, has the kryptonite gas shot on them. And it is basically happenstance that he survives. How do you feel about the show, again, kind of trading on the death of Superman stuff here, where it's like this big battle on the streets of Metropolis, and it ends with Superman in Lois's arms?
Yeah, I mean, I love all of those echoes. I really do. And I mean, I think ultimately I agree with your read on that because it is true. He survives the blast when Ching does it to him. So clearly we and he have evidence that this is not necessarily a fatal move.
Right.
At the same time, and especially, I'm not even thinking of so much of Man of Steel, but I'm thinking about the John Byrne story in the comics that preceded this, where Superman made the rather cold and calculated decision to execute the Zod and his companions in the pocket dimension that were responsible for genocide, and the famous cover of him in the executioner's garb and the kryptonite and all of that. And a part of me is like, well, it could have been interesting if that was something he was really faced, like he actually had to make a choice whether or not to do. But
sure.
I think your reading of it where he knows this could be survivable. It might not necessarily be like, so he is taking a chance, right? And he's, like you said, punching harder than he ever has before. So I'm cool with it. I guess it felt a little bit like a cheat where it's like, I'm not going to do this because I can't kill. I won't kill. I don't believe in it. And then he does it. And it's like, wow. But then like the guy just lives anyway. And it's like,
and good news, it doesn't kill him, but we should get him out of here. And then the gas kills him anyway. So it's fine. Maybe
I would have liked if the show made a little bit more of a point about exactly what he thought he was doing in that moment. But I agree with you. I think we can read into it and we can kind of fill in the blanks. And the fact that he goes to carry him out of there, just like going back to the very beginning of this, he was willing to run through that kryptonite force field to save the guy who had put all of these people in danger. It's like, that's who he is. And when you're talking about the theme music, soaring right as he's in the middle of the battle. What does that remind us of? It's like Power Rangers, man. It's like once that theme kicks in, it's like, And
also, like, one of my favorite experiences throughout all of my podcast was getting to interview the composer of this show, who talked about, like, for these two, the season premiere of season 4, they got a real orchestra again and they went for it. And I'm like, where did the Nora theme come from? And he's like, oh, it's basically a ripoff of the Darth Vader theme of the Imperial March. I'm like, yep. Now that you say that, I totally hear it. And to hear that music, and then when he has those moments sprinkle in that Lois and Clark theme, it is so damn triumphant. It is truly, it's why you hire an orchestra. Like, it sounds awesome. And for me too, it is totally just like emotional, but having that music under that moment where he does the killing shot, theoretically, it is nothing but heroic for me. And it's what allows me, or it helps me kind of buy back the idea that, like, he's not trying to kill anybody here. He's trying to end it. He's just using the force that he needs to, that he's never had to before, to just stop this. It's not about killing the guy.
Absolutely.
Is he upset that he's dead? Not at all. But that's a different conversation.
And as he's going to carry Nor out, Nor's minions arrive in violation of the rules of combat that were established.
Yes, it must only be the two of them.
Yeah. But then they got hit by this kryptonite gas, and all die except Clark, because the others absorbed enough of the gas, which is like, all right, we'll go with that.
Whatever.
We'll go with that. That's fine. As Lois and Jimmy are running in, I'm like, you guys probably shouldn't be breathing this either.
This is really bad. This really messed up Lex's hand in some versions of this,
Yeah, it's like, this still, you guys, because I feel like, didn't they
just like radioactive?
I feel like they took like poison gas to begin with and laced it with kryptonite. So it's like,
very possible.
This isn't good, but they're all right. When we talked about Krypton, I kept coming back to this idea that show was better than it had any right to be. It's like this little sci-fi series.
My favorite type of show. Yep.
Exactly. And it gives us, the Krypton show gives us like the best Brainiac we've ever gotten, one of the best Zods, one of the best Doomsdays. And kind of continuing that theme here, it's like, we love Lois and Clark, but look, for a 90s ABC rom-com version of the Superman legend, this 4-parter is better than it has any right to be. Like, they really went for it, and I just had such a great time. And I had an even better time talking about it.
I'm so glad. Not that I thought you hated it when you asked me to be on this episode that you completely curated and made up your mind for, but it's cool to me that, as someone who is much more learned in the Superman mythos than I am, that you can look at this and be like, oh, no, this still has its place in that pantheon of these stories. That's very cool.
Yeah, I really had such a great time with it. Is there anything? We went for 2 hours, and I think we hit on it all. But was there anything we didn't talk about?
A breezy 2 hours, yeah.
It didn't feel. Speaking for myself, it didn't feel like 2 hours. So
no, I always feel like I'm talking too much on these. So it's all on anyone's podcast that I'm guesting on. So this has been great, man. Thank you.
Is there anything we didn't talk about with respect to New Krypton that you wanted to?
Not with respect to these, just that, like, if anyone knows how the show ends, spoilers, that there's a very good chance that they would have dipped back into this in a season 5. That didn't happen. And that is personally something I'd be very interested in seeing. It's another big moment in their lives, without being too spoilery, though. Again,
I know
your audience. Yeah. It's like, if the baby that was given to them in the finale winds up being connected, if it's like Zara and Ching's baby that gets sent away to keep the heir of the house safe or whatever, that's really cool to me, and something I would have loved to have seen. And I love that this show, clearly they kind of recognized, like, this was something that we could have dealt with again in the future. So for me, it's just like, I think they did a great job here. And as ever, though the show totally peters out at the end of season 4, and I completely understand why it got canceled, I would have loved to have seen them dip back into this well and see what that could have been. Would it have been as grand and great as this? maybe not. So maybe we're lucky that we got what it was. But I'll always be curious about what they would have done with the rest of this.
Me too, and it is the potential for where they were going is a compelling reason for not putting the genie back in the bottle. Because now, do we get the sense, how many people do we think were on that ship? Like, we don't think that was all of New Krypton, or do we?
I don't think so. No, I think that's the the 9-to-5s are back on the hunk of meteor or whatever that they're living on.
Fair enough. Oh, what I was going to say though is, like, hypothetically, let's say they all were on this ship, like that they're this colony of 1,000. I mean, you figure by this point now they've grown, but like, let's just say for argument's sake, everyone or virtually everyone was on this ship.
Sure.
You could see a scenario where the military launches a strike on the ship at the end and they're all killed. And so now it's like, well, not only is there, nowhere for him to go, but like these other Kryptonians are now off the board.
Sure.
I mean, again, I'm glad.
That's dark.
Well, I don't want to get too far ahead or spoil anything, but that New Krypton saga in the comics, New Krypton doesn't stick around after that. We'll just put it that way. Right. And there, General Sam Lane does play a critical role in that. So I guess I kind of had that in my head as well. I mean, that would have been super dark. I mean, that would have been an awful note.
I was going to say, I don't think this show's Superman would let that happen.
No, I know.
I get you. Can I throw out another just thought that is always very funny to me, where like at the end of this, the whole thing is he left New Krypton, he left Earth to go help New Krypton, because without his marriage to Zara, it would have fallen to hell. Zara marries him, and then he gets scattered to the winds and then is forced to marry Lord Nor. Lord Nor dies, and then from then on, Clark is like, great, Zara's got this. So like, I love the convenience of the death here, where it's like, it actually buys us out of Clark's commitment here, where it's like, he has been, legally disgraced or whatever by Krypton, though everyone that's got a brain knows what happened. And now Zara gets to be kind of a free agent and rule the way that she needs to, with her love, the ever-changing Lieutenant Chang by her side. Like, that is so clean and TV to me in the best way that it's worth commenting on. I think it's impressive.
Yeah, it works. It works because it's like that. That's the thing. It's like, it's not just that this marriage has been arranged and all of that, but it's that the threat of Norse. And once you take that away, and you also feel like he has made his point to these people. He has proven himself in this way, and he has saved everybody. And now it's like, look, you guys can figure this out.
Oh, Kala,
on your own. Yeah. So no, that works. And we end with Lois and Clark, on the balcony, once again talking about getting married and what they mean to each other, and going at it, and still not consummating their relationship, even though yet again, as we're pulling away on this balcony, it's like, come on.
We'll see. But yeah, I do love the again, they're just so damn good together. Just the idea of like, we're not waiting for anything else stupid to happen to us. Basically, like, let's get married this week. And that's essentially what happens in the next episode, though, of course, the wedding ruiner or whatever, the wedding wrecker, whatever, Myrtle Beach shows up and gives them a little run for their money. But
no, look,
I love the sentiment, at least.
Me too. And you always feel they're longing for one another, whether they're in the same scene or they're apart. You really feel like these two just want each other. And I don't mean just sexually, although I do, but more than that, right? This connection that they have, really, it comes across so much so that when Clark leaves at the end of season 3, he seemingly, even though she's not Kryptonian, seemingly is able to communicate via telepathy a little bit.
Send a little something to her. Not the first time in the series that they've had a little magical realism with their connection, which for this show, I think is totally valid and fine.
Look, they're going to get married by an angel in the next episode. So it's like, it's fine.
Yeah.
But listen, man, I had so much fun talking about this. So I thank you. I hope everyone checks out Lois and Clark, the new podcast of Superman, and always hold on to DC's Legends of Tomorrow. You can get both shows on all major podcast platforms and follow on social media. Anything else you want to plug or anywhere specifically you want to direct people?
No, just I told you off mic about it, and hopefully it comes true. I'm scheduled right now for like my most exciting interview of Lois and Clark ever for me, aside from Kay Callan, to be clear. But I'm really excited to talk to a guest that I'm about to talk to in a few days. So as long as that comes through, there's some really cool Lois and Clark talk coming up soon. And also we've got a special Black Friday episode coming where some friends of this show and my own show, some real nerds, get into the weeds with some toys and DC merch. So keep an eye out for that stuff.
Fair. Look, I love how even though you had a series finale for Lois and Clark, you're still I love it. No, I love it. I love it. I just did the series finale of one of my other podcasts, My Comic Shop History, and the running joke even throughout that recording was, when's the next finale going to be? Because I've had various finales of that show over the years, but I'm like, no, like this is really the last one, and it is. But I love that for you. You're still going and still, sharing the love for this show.
Yeah.
And I hope that, I would imagine, we have you here. We probably have some people who enjoy Lois and Clark who maybe don't listen to this podcast regularly, who have come here because you're here, because we're talking about Lois and Clark. So I welcome anyone who's joining us. And
my God, yes. If anyone is listening to me that has my opinion matters to you at all, which sorry, but Anthony's show is phenomenal and a great. If you've missed corners of the Superman mythos and DC universe, it is a wonderful way to kind of fill in the blanks. And frankly, you've gotten me to go back and look at stuff that I hadn't seen before, just by the way that you cover stuff, and even in episodes that don't matter. And it's like a little offhand mention. I love how deep you get into it, and you have such a good grasp on the different versions of it. And you talk to people that have even more information than you. Truly, it sounds like I'm just blowing smoke up your ass, but I love how you've structured this podcast, and you've really made it your own thing. Where for me, when I started podcasting, it was just a rewatch podcast. That's what you do. You blah, 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 blah. And you have found a way to really engage kind of all corners of your fandom for this character and make that a show that you want it to be, presumably. It's a wonderful thing, dude. It's been so fun to see your show evolve over the last couple of years.
Oh, that's very kind. I appreciate that. We got to get you on here more often. This is great.
Sorry. I'm genuinely a fan of your show. So this has been fun, man.
I appreciate it. And likewise, and I hope everyone checks out your podcast. And again, thank you again for coming on here. Thank you, audience. I hope you enjoyed. And make sure you keep tuning in. We still have 2 more installments of Doomed Planet. So come back next week for our next all new episode. Until then, it's about what you do. It's about action. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Many of you have already used this code, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Be sure to check out our sister podcast series, Another Exciting Episode in the Adventures of Superman, an episode-by-episode breakdown of the classic George Reeves television show, available wherever you get podcasts. Please join us on social media, become a patron, and subscribe, rate, and review today. Links are in the show notes. Thank you all. Hop in the Supermobile and join us for the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, available exclusively for members of my Patreon community. It's a monthly tour across the DC universe with the signature Digging for Kryptonite style applied to your other DC favorites. Additional Patreon rewards include advanced listens, sponsorships, and more. We offer regular monthly memberships, discounted annual plans, free trials, and a la carte purchases. Visit patreon.com/Anthony Desiato or click the link in the show notes for more. Thank you all.